32 radishes. Notice two things. One, it's 16 different crops. You've got a 4x4 that's 16 square feet. You're going to plant each square foot in a different crop because you don't need to have that much coming ripe at once. You're only going to plant what you need, and you're going to succession plant so that it's coming ripe as you need it. Okay? The other thing to notice, this is all spring vegetables. We still have 2 more seasons to plant. So you're going to pull the beets and plant green beans. You're going to pull the radishes and plant tomatoes. In the fall, you're going to reverse that. So everything you planted in the spring, you can plant again in the fall. Spinach is one of the best things to plant in the fall because it'll grow, it'll start its growth, it'll go dormant when it gets cold, and then this time of year, when you start getting these 50 degrees, you're going to have spinach this high. And you'll have spinach in the February or early March. So plant your spinach in the fall.
All plants survive the winter?
Yes. The spinach will survive the winter unprotected. Now there's some other things you can do. This gets into a more advanced class. There's some things that you can do to get a 4th season with some protection. These are the pyramid boxes that you can do different design ideas. Step 2 is your boxes. The thing to think about, we're going to do raised beds. This is where the raised beds come in for your program. Everything's going to be raised beds. We're not going to go into the ground. We're not going to use native soils. And since we're not using native soils, we've got to have something to hold that soil in place. And that's where we come up with the 6 inches of soil is all you need. You can make your boxes out of whatever your budget and landscape design ideas will allow. You could do brick, block, wood. This is a composite lumber that's going to last forever. And so whatever was going to fit in with your landscape and what your budget allows. You can go make your own homemade box, buy a 2x6 by 16 foot board at Lowe's or Home Depot. They'll cut it down to 4 feet for you. That's about $9. Very inexpensive, but it's only going to last 4 to 5 years before it starts to break down. Cedar will last 10, 15 years. This will last. So there's other options there. And unfortunately, a longer one, I have some pictures of lots of other design ideas too. There's stone and brick and block. All right, step 3. You notice in the first book, he had 1-foot boards. Well, for one thing, the boards weren't a good idea because they got slippery and they would warp. But 1 foot was not enough because as those plants started growing and spilling out over the sides, you didn't have any place to walk. So he said, forget that. We're going to make our aisles 3 feet wide. You can make your aisles out of any material that you'd like. This one shows grass. It's wide enough to mow. You could use brick, again, brick, block, stone chips, mulch. You could pave it, whatever. I've got pictures of people using tarps down. So whatever makes sense for your landscape design. If you're going to use anything other than grass, I recommend that you put landscape fabric under your whole area because, gosh, you're not going to have weeds in your gardens. You don't want weeds in your aisles. So put landscape fabric underneath of everything. If you're completely refurbishing something, just roll it all out.
I hear you say that the box width itself is a minimum of 2 feet.
Oh, you can put the minimum whatever you want. I mean, you could do a square foot garden in a container like this. You could use these methods in a container like this. That's only 6 inches wide. In that, you could get lettuce. Lettuce is 4 per square foot, so that's 6 inches apart. So you could get 3 lettuce plants on here. Green beans are 9 per square foot, so you could get 2. So yeah, your minimum is whatever you design. A 2x2 it just seems like a reasonable one because you get 4 square feet. But you could do all kinds of things. All right, aisles 3 feet apart, whatever you want to do. Step 4, this is the important part, and I'm going to slow down a little bit here because this is what makes you able to do the 6 inches of soil, and this is why you don't have weeds. Mel has gone all over the world, and every place he's gone, the #1 complaint people had is our soil is terrible. It doesn't matter whether it's heavy clay soils or heavy sand soils or rocky, or even if they have pretty nice soil, it was weedy because anytime you till soil, you're bringing weed seeds up. So Mel said, why are we messing with that? Let's forget that. We're going to completely replace the soil. And after a lot of experimenting, he came up with a soil mix that's 1/3 peat moss, 1/3 coarse vermiculite. It's hard to find, but Wilson's is one place that you can get it. And 1/3 blended compost. And the blend is what's really important. You can't just use one source of compost. Like we need a variety of nutrients in order to be healthy. Plants do as well. So if you're making your own compost, which is of course the least expensive way of doing it, and you're adding your kitchen scraps and your yard scraps and some newspaper and whatever, I mean that's a whole class in itself, how to compost. If you're making your own, then yes, that's a good nutrient mix. But if you're buying bagged compost, let's say cow manure, that's not enough in itself. So you need to get a source from 5 different sources if you're buying compost. That's really important. And so that's the mix. We're going to mix that together. That takes 8 cubic feet to fill a 4x4 box. We're working on getting a truckload of bagged Nels mix that I think Ned is going to carry as well if we get it here. But it's not here yet, so it won't hold here. People ask me, because we tried to get a truckload last year and we never got it. So 6 inches of soil, really, what can you grow? Anything that you grow in the home vegetable garden, you can grow in the 6 inches of soil with the Nels mix. If you try and do it with your garden soil, it won't work. Okay? It has to be the Nels mix. You see her Nell is 6'3". This little girl is 11, 12 years old. That's probably a 12-foot sunflower that's there. Look over here, 6 inches of soil. There's 4 in 1 square foot. There's landscaping fabric underneath that. Those roots are not going deeper. There's no other support that's growing in that 6 inches of soil. In fact, the woman, when Mel he had helpers helping him plant the demo gardens, he said plant 1 per square foot, and she put 4 seeds in. I guess we can get more production than we thought in that square foot. So I think that even a lot of this could be tighter plans. Why do roots go deep? They're looking for water and nutrients. So if they're finding all of that in the 6 inches, they don't need to go any deeper. Mel doesn't leave anything to chance, and so he looked into it. He said, well, what would happen if we don't put the landscape fabric in? And he put a deep root, deep feeder, a plant that goes deep, and they stayed in the 6 inches of soil, these plants did, because they're getting everything they need in that 6 inches. Step 5 is your grid, and this is what makes it a square foot garden. If you don't have the grid in place, it's not a square foot garden. In the original book, he said, you could use string, you could use whatever you have there. Well, he's found that people don't put it in place, and what happens, if it's not in place, that old row mentality kicks in, and we start doing little rows, little 4-foot rows, instead of doing planting the square foot. So if you have the grid in place, it makes it a lot easier. It has to be rigid, it has to be permanent. And it can be something that you pull up at the end of the year, like these you can pull up. But you want it in place through the whole season. Because remember we talked about that succession planting. So not everything's going to come ripe at the same time. So you want that grid in place when you pull those radishes out, and you're going to know how to put those green beans in, and where you're going to do that. Step 6 is care. Never, ever, ever walk on your garden. That's why we're doing the raised beds and in the width that we have. So, you don't want to walk on your garden. You also there's only 2 tools really that you need in the square foot garden. One is a trowel. You harvest, you add a couple trowels of compost, and then you're good to go for the next one. Once you mix the soil mix, it's a one-time thing. Years after that, you just add compost to help feed the soil. That's how you replenish it, not with fertilizers. So if you're making your own, you're doing that for free. That's where some more of your cost savings comes in. When you're harvesting, or if there's a yellow leaf that you need to get out of there, because once the leaves are yellow, they're no longer doing your plant any good, just clip it off.